kada je teško.
Tačno na mestu.
Evo sada mi javlja da je Tanjugu upravo potvrđeno.
Ovo je naš posao koji se nikada ne zaustavlja. Radoznali,
Odgovorni,
tačni. Mi smo Tanjug.
80 godina sa vama.
Tanjug aplikacija. Prvi saznajte najtačnije informacije. Besplatno na Google i App Store-u.
Od sada i Tanjug TV na Telebox aplikaciji. Besplatno. Gledajte šta želite, kada želite i gde želite. K1, Kazbuka, TV Doktor i Tanjug TV na Telebox aplikaciji. Dostupno na Google Playu i na Apple Store-u.
Ovo je Tanjug.
Ušli smo upravo u 10. sat današnjih razgovora.
Ovo su trenuci koji mogu da vam promene život.
Ovo su lica kojima verujete.
Dobro jutro, Tanjug.
Ovo je iskustvo.
I kada je lepo,
Šta za vas predstavlja jedan trenutak?
I kada je teško.
Tačno na mestu.
Evo sada mi javlja da je Tanjugu upravo potvrđeno.
Ovo je naš posao koji se nikada ne zaustavlja. Radoznali,
odgovorni,
tačni. Mi smo Tanjug.
80 godina sa vama.
Tanjug aplikacija. Prvi saznajte najtačnije informacije. Besplatno na Google i App Store-u.
Od sada i Tanjug TV na Telebox aplikaciji. Besplatno. Gledajte šta želite, kada želite i gde želite. K1, Kazbuka, TV Doktor i Tanjug TV na Telebox aplikaciji. Dostupno na Google Playu i na Apple Store-u.
Ovo je Tanjug.
Ušli smo upravo u 10. sat današnjih razgovora.
Ovo su trenuci koji mogu da vam promene život.
Ovo su lica kojima verujete.
Dobro jutro, Tanjug.
Ovo je iskustvo.
I kada je lepo,
Šta za vas predstavlja jedan trenutak?
I kada je teško.
Tačno na mestu.
Evo sada mi javljaju da je Tanjugu upravo potvrđeno.
Ovo je naš posao koji se nikada ne zaustavlja. Radoznali,
odgovorni,
tačni. Mi smo Tanjug.
80 godina sa vama.
Tanjug aplikacija. Prvi saznajte najtačnije informacije. Besplatno na Google i App Store-u.
Od sada i Tanjug TV na Telebox aplikaciji. Besplatno. Gledajte šta želite, kada želite i gde želite. K1, Kazbuka, TV Doktor i Tanjug TV na Telebox aplikaciji. Dostupno na Google Playu i na Apple Store-u.
Ovo je Tanjug.
Ušli smo upravo u 10. sat današnjih razgovora.
Ovo su trenuci koji mogu da vam promene život.
Ovo su lica kojima verujete.
Dobro jutro, Tanjuk.
Ovo je iskustvo.
I kada je lepo,
Šta za vas predstavlja jedan trenutak?
I kada je teško.
Tačno na mestu.
Evo sada mi javljaju da je Tanjugu upravo potvrđeno.
Ovo je naš posao koji se nikada ne zaustavlja. Radoznali,
odgovorni,
tačni. Mi smo Tanjug.
80 godina sa vama.
Tanjug aplikacija. Prvi saznajte najtačnije informacije. Besplatno na Google i App Store-u.
Od sada i Tanjug TV na Telebox aplikaciji. Besplatno. Gledajte šta želite, kada želite i gde želite. K1, Kazbuka, TV Doktor i Tanjug TV na Telebox aplikaciji. Dostupno na Google Playu i na Apple Store-u.
Security Council's call to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is the Security Council Resolution 1160 of 1998, 1199 of 1988, 1203 of 1988, 1239 of 1999, and 1244 of 1999. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representative of Serbia to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. On behalf of the Council, I welcome His Excellency Mr. Alexander Vucic, President of the Republic of Serbia, and I request the Protocol Officer to escort him to his seat at the Council table. He's not arrived. We will suspend the meeting for a few minutes, so I apologize. But this is an issue of UN protocol. UN protocol has not allowed the entire delegation of Kosovo to enter the building. And so we have to wait until protocol has rectified it. It seems that they have, so we can resume the meeting. So The meeting is resumed. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Ms. Catherine Ziadeh, Special Representative of the Secretary General and Head of the United Nations Interim Administration Mission in Kosovo, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I also invite Ms. Vjosa Osmani Sidriou to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to the document S/2024/282, the report of the Secretary General of the United Nations Interim Administration Mission in Kosovo. I now give the floor to Ms. Caroline Ziadeh.
Madam President, distinguished members of the Security Councils, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and privilege to brief the Council on the latest developments in Kosovo. I note this is my second address this year, owing to the extraordinary session held on 8th of February. Madam President, the Secretary General's report before you covers the main developments from 19th September through 15th of March. Allow me, therefore, both to update you on significant developments since and to offer you few observations of the situation in the wider perspective. I have held many consultations with political actors in Pristina and Belgrade, with religious leaders, civil society organizations, and with our main international partners on the ground. One of the key common observations is dissatisfaction with the level of progress being achieved through political dialogue and the direct effects this has upon the security situation. The level of mistrust, unfortunately, remains high and must be addressed. During recent months, tensions have simmered, with one major explanation being an inability to address long-standing issues through adequate communication and dialogue, whether this be between Pristina and Belgrade or between the Kosovo Serbs communities and the Pristina Central Authority. Over several months, sustained efforts have been focused on resolving the contested issue of local government legitimacy in 4 municipalities populated mainly by ethnic Serbs in the northern part of Kosovo. In December last year, Kosovo Serbs in Leposavic, North Mitrovica, Zubin Potok, and Zvečan collected a sufficient number of signatures, well over the required 20% of the registered electorate, to begin the process of recalling the mayors elected there in April 2023 by less than 4% of total registered voters due to the Kosovo Serbs' decision not to participate. This process, long discussed in the framework of the EU facilitated talks, has aimed toward reducing the tensions which inevitably resulted from these elections, including violent protests that centered around several municipal premises in northern Kosovo last May. Recently, representatives of the Kosovo Serb community in the north have claimed that the conditions set forth to recall the mayors do not allow for all representative participation in the recall vote. Subsequently, EU and Quint country representatives based in Pristina have urged a reconsideration of this position. While Kosovo Serbs have responded that their arguments are legitimate and being insufficiently accounted for, The recall process took place yesterday without any security incidents. However, only 253 out of 46,556 registered voters cast their votes. This, unfortunately, sets the stage for protracting and prolonging a fragile and unresolved issue. From our point of view, we will continue to support the EU-facilitated dialogue as the forum to find a consensual resolution of outstanding issues. Madam President, over the past year, there have been numerous setbacks in efforts to build more confidence in peaceful relations among Kosovo's ethnic communities through political dialogue. The Secretary General in his reports and I, in my briefings to the Council, have previously reported on a number of these setbacks, while wider international attention was drawn by the serious security incidents which occurred in the village of Bainska last September. I continue to stress the importance of accountability for that extremely serious incident through a thorough, fact-based investigation and assessment of its circumstances. This is both a judicial matter and also a political necessity in order to avert any recurrence. Across the same period, numerous developments have caused hardship and fueled mistrust between the communities, developments which could and should have been foreseen and avoided by good faith dialogue. The Kosovo Serb community representatives have shared their feelings that they are faced with human rights challenges. These, as well as the frequent use of inflammatory and derogatory rhetoric in both directions, demand close attention and scrutiny, as well as responsible remedial action by those in leadership positions. During a time when international political and financial investments continue to be made in support of good faith dialogue, unilateral action, particularly concerning matters that lie clearly within the scope of the dialogue process, cannot help to alleviate the concerns among ordinary people. The various agreements reached thus far through the dialogue process provide a clear roadmap toward the settling of many of these outstanding issues. Regardless of which side undertakes unilateral actions or the justifications provided for doing so, in the end, such actions only perpetuate an environment of insecurity and mistrust between the communities. To build upon my remarks delivered on 8th of February in this Council, I must reiterate my continued concerns, also expressed by several member states, about the manner in which the new regulation on cash transactions was communicated and implemented, and how it has affected the more vulnerable segments of the non-majority community. Under the facilitation of the European Union, the parties have met 5 times, on the 27th of February, 19th and 25th of March, 4th and 18th of April, to seek a solution that addresses the concerns raised and mitigate unintended consequences. We should remain hopeful that a solution can be reached, while urging the parties to work together to find practical solutions in the nearest future. Another element of the main agreements, which can provide solutions for this and other outstanding normalization matters, is the taking of earnest, credible steps towards establishing the association community of Serb majority municipalities. whatever the community municipalities as final form, that form clearly will encompass the elements of sustainable financial and institutional guarantees for the Kosovo Serb community. This includes matters of local administration, along with essential basic services like education and healthcare. Repeated calls for its establishment should be heeded, as it will serve as an important step towards fostering trust between the Serb community and central authority. Madam President, the full implementation of the EU facilitated agreements has become an ever more pressing priority in order to help alleviate the continued series of crises that have emerged. It is therefore of utmost importance for both sides to remain committed to constructive, good faith engagement and that they find practical compromises. Madam President, on matters where implementation of essential agreements has advanced, meaningful results have been accomplished during this same time frame. These include advances on vehicle license plate validity, steps forward on the energy roadmap, and on the customs. I wish to commend the Pristina leadership for taking action to fully implement the High Court decision of 2016, affirming the property rights of the Visoki Dečani monastery, which had previously languished for many years. Such action is to be welcomed, since it significantly contributes to both inter-community trust as well as public confidence in the rule of law. Madam President, UNMIC will continue to make full use of its resources in partnership with UN Kosovo team and our implementing partners to help the communities to overcome existing mistrust and to find opportunities for reaping the benefits of genuine cooperation. We will continue to seek support to work across multiple fields that creates new space for communities to work jointly to positively influence processes that affect the future of all. This remains a pillar of our mandated work. The mission has utilized its essential programmatic activities resources to facilitate innovation and collaboration to encourage greater mutual trust between the communities, find common ground, and establish more widespread tolerance to Kosovo's diversity. Madam President, in this context, the Barabar Center continues to carry out just such efforts at the grassroots level. Since my last report to you, the number of the center's major activities has surpassed 70 over the course of less than 1 year, engaging with more than 4,000 individuals representing all communities in Kosovo. To help inspire champions of trust building in Kosovo, in November, we conducted the second United Nations Kosovo Trust Building Forum, involving participants from all communities and professions who agreed upon 27 recommendations and many more related actions in 6 thematic areas: economic empowerment, environmental protection, language rights, media and misinformation, participation and inclusion, and strengthening the rule of law. More innovative initiatives lie ahead in collaboration and with mutual support with our many international and local partners. Madam President, the promotion and protection of human rights is a fundamental part of UNMIC's mandated work. Together with our partners, we continue to encourage the authorities to place human rights and rule of law principles at the heart of sound policy judgments. This applies to a wide range of human rights and freedom, including rights to equality and non-discrimination, language, minority, and property rights, as well as freedoms of movement, expression, religion, and assembly. The enjoyment of these rights and freedoms is indispensable in sustaining Kosovo's multi-ethnic society. Madam President, on matters of transitional justice and the right to truth, I welcome the resumption of meetings of the Working Group on Missing Persons, with the first meeting in 3 years, having been successfully held on the 31st of January 2024. This direct engagement must continue. During this period, UNMIK continued to extend its support to the Legal Aid Center and the Kosovo Law Institute, assisting hundreds of vulnerable individuals, conducted specialized training for young Kosovo Serb lawyers to enhance their work in pursuit of the rule of law, and sponsored law students at a legal clinic promoting multi-ethnic media work. Madam President, while progress has been made in the legal and policy frameworks to address gender-based violence, the need for enhanced cooperation remains between government, civil society, and international organizations. The mission will continue to employ proactive measures, strengthen support services, train professionals, raise awareness, and empower women and girls towards full implementation and comprehensive implementation of women, peace, and security agenda. The mission also continued to prioritize the youth, peace, and security agenda. In this regard, the 6th UN Youth Assembly in Kosovo this May will again serve as a platform to gather young activists and leaders from across community in Kosovo and from around the region. The Assembly will support cross-community dialogue and entrepreneurship to help meet the challenges and opportunities of an AI-powered world. Madam President, allow me to add a further point of critical emphasis, namely that to achieve progress in Kosovo and fulfill our mandated goals effectively, the issues we and our partners tackle must be understood and treated as part of the wider regional context. We are aware that our work is part of a combined international effort to promote prosperity, stability, and peace in Kosovo and beyond. Madam President, I wish to express my appreciation for the daily cooperation and support we receive from our major multilateral partners, in particular KFOR, and the strength of our coordination with UN Kosovo team. Together, and with your continuing support, we will navigate this challenging period by maintaining foremost our focus on the rights and well-being of people. We will continue to call upon all leaders, political and civic, to meet their obligation in the same respect. Similarly, we will continue to give our full support to prioritize dialogue over unilateral actions or zero-sum divisive rhetoric. Acknowledging the trends of setbacks in overall trust, we will remain as determined partners to all who share the foresight for a better future. Good faith dialogue, communication, and mutual understanding mark the path forward. Progress is born from actions undertaken with the willingness to forge compromises. That's the progress. Madam President, I conclude by extending my deep appreciation to you and to all of you, distinguished members of the Council, for your continued support. Such support is indispensable to UNMIK's continued endeavors to strengthen the conditions for a peaceful and normal life for all people in Kosovo, linked inextricably to peace in the region and beyond. And I thank you, Madam President.
I thank Ms. Yadeh for her briefing. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Alexander Vučić, President of the Republic of Serbia.
Dear Madam President, esteemed members of the Security Council, dear Special Representative of the Secretary General, allow me, before I move to the report we are speaking about today, to remind you that on 19th of April was exactly 11 years since the most important agreement between Belgrade and Pristina on the path of normalization of relations was adopted in Brussels. One of the signatories was also the European Union. 11 years later, even though Serbs met all the difficult obligations from the mentioned agreement, the community of Serb-majority municipalities and its formation are not even on the horizon. For all the Serbs living in Kosovo and Metohija, for the entire Serbia, these 11 years have been 11 years of undelivered promises, daily excuses and untruths. 11 years of accidental or intentional inability of the EU as the guarantor of the respective agreement to move things from square one. Of course, all that resulted in what we can call today the legal violence and physical harassment of Serbian population in Kosovo and Metohija. First and foremost, I extend my gratitude to Secretary General Guterres and Special Representative Ziyade for their dedication to fulfilling the UNMIC mandate as outlined in UN Security Council Resolution 1244. And therefore, while the subject report may not fully capture the severity of the situation on the ground, it actually documents nearly all significant events during the reporting period, and this holds considerable value for Member States. To gain a more comprehensive understanding of this report, I wish to highlight certain critical points for the esteemed members of this body to consider. The report on UNMIC's work that is before us today is being discussed a month and a half since this distinguished body held a special session on situation in Kosovo and Metohija on February the 8th. Let me remind you that this urgent session was held upon submission by the Republic of Serbia that the provisional institutions of self-government in Kosovo, led by the Albanian leadership, are jeopardizing international peace and stability. To that submission, the Republic of Serbia also enclosed the detailed explanation of actions by which the provisional institutions continuously and intentionally created the unbearable living conditions for Serbs and other non-Albanians. Additionally, the Republic of Serbia presented to the Security Council all the actions by which those institutions carry out well-planned, widespread and systematic harassment attacks against Serb civilians, including continuous legal violence, physical violence and selective targeting. Urgent Security Council session on 8th of February was held thanks to the fact that all members of the Security Council evaluated that our arguments in the submitted complaint had been based on facts, and in accordance with that, they approved our request. Especially emphasize that the majority which accepted our argumentation consisted here of the countries that do not respect sovereignty and territorial integrity of the Republic of Serbia in a way envisaged by the provisions of the legally binding UN Security Council Resolution 1244. Thereby, it is much more important that such a structure of the Security Council member states respected our arguments and took into consideration on this important session the ethnically motivated intentional creation of unbearable living conditions for Serbs, as well as the campaign of well-planned, widespread and systematic harassment against Serb civilians. And their persecution by the provisional institutions of self-government in Kosovo. I will remind you that almost all members of this distinguished body expressed profound concern for the position of Serbs and other non-Albanians in Kosovo and Metohija and had urged for the dialogue. During those discussions, special emphasis was placed on the acute measure of abolishing cash transactions in dinars, Serbian dinars, whereby Prishtina's regime dramatically and additionally made daily life of Serbs and other non-Albanians difficult, given that they predominantly received their income in dinars. This issue was discussed in the context of denying them access to even basic social services such as healthcare, education, etc. However, said measure to abolish the use of dinar representing the culmination of protracted, comprehensive and ethnically motivated campaign of widespread and systematic attacks against non-Albanian civilians by Prishtina's institutions is still effective. If you remember, Albin Kurti was speaking here in front of all of you that he was giving to Serbs the 3-month transitional period in which no Serb rights would be abused regarding giving and accepting dinars as a currency. Of course, since the moment session ended, no one in Pristina or in the international community has ever mentioned 3-month transitional period, and all the measures against Serbs related to dinar started being implemented immediately. That is why Serbs and other non-Albanian population in Kosovo and Metohija remains unable to get their pensions, salaries, social giving, child allowances, and all other payments, and why the work of schools, kindergartens, medical, social, and all other institutions is practically disrupted. Employees of those institutions, those that are still operating, face daily fears from groundless apprehensions which Kurti's regime is carrying out on a mass scale under false charges. This situation profoundly affects children in kindergartens, pensioners, single mothers, and severely ill persons in rural environments, but also everyone else. This issue stands out as one of the few where Pristina authorities demonstrate lack of discrimination affecting everyone equally, regardless of their age or gender, as long as they are non-Albanian and do not endorse their chauvinistic agenda aimed at realizing the Greater Albania concept. And yet, instead of being sanctioned, Kurti's regime keeps being rewarded. I would like to take this opportunity to inform all member states who have sincerely and with good intentions called for dialogue that from February the 8th, 2024 to the present day, 5 rounds of discussions have been held in Brussels based on UN Security Council Resolution 1244 and General Assembly Resolution 64-298 from 2010. The only tangible outcome of these deliberations has been the exposure of Pristina's true motives. Pristina's head negotiator, Bislimi, Albin Kurti's deputy and his partner in the persecution of the civilian population, confirmed that their unilateral and escalatory decision to effectively abolish the dinar in Kosovo and Metohija has profoundly affected the people. And unlike Kurti's assertions made before this esteemed body that Serbia's accusation was false and that no one, including Serbs, was impacted by their decision, Bislimi's sincerity acknowledged the actual intentions to eradicate all Serbian presence in Kosovo and Metohija. Therefore, he, like Kurti, remained committed to Greater Albania hegemonic aspirations, which preclude any negotiations with Serbia and coexistence with Serbs. His conduct in the dialogue process, characterized by a strategy of sabotage through presence, underscored his reluctance to pursue a compromise solution, as had been advocated by this esteemed body, to safeguard the population. And yet, instead of being sanctioned, Kurti's regime keeps being rewarded. Ladies and gentlemen, in parallel, Pristina's brutal repression in persecuting Serbs and other non-Albanian has been additionally deepened and strengthened. Since the urgent session, 16 new ethnically motivated attacks against Serbs took place. They involve: number 1, armed attack against Serb young men in Gračanica; number 2, gunfiring and intimidation of ever smaller number of Serb returnees in the west of Kosovo; number 3, continuing unjustified detentions; number 4, police violent removal of the plates which names of the places in Serbian language, in Cyrillic alphabet in purely Serb municipalities in the north of Kosovo; continuous attacks within the campaign of Serb persecution broadened after 8th of February to intrusions of Pristina's para-police forces into Serbian pharmacies in Kosovska Mitrovica and Zubin Potok, where the persecutors of Serbs confiscated huge amounts of medications. On the other hand, while the UNMIC report maintains factual precision, it lacks in capturing the interconnected events over an extended period of time. These events, when analyzed together, paint a stark picture of the ground reality. This limitation in reporting stems not only from the length of the reporting period, but also from the methodology employed, which has remained consistently superficial and brief. Therefore, it is my obligation, esteemed representatives of the Member States, to offer further insight into the reported events, enabling you to grasp the overall situation more comprehensively. The UN Security Council emergency session is not presented in the report as an event of special relevance. The respective session was mentioned only in item 22, and even there it has been wrongly put that it had been held at Serbia's request to discuss the consequences of the new currency regulation. This claim is factually incorrect because Serbian request was for emergency session adopted by the UN Security Council had been based on complaint supported by arguments for endangering international peace and security by Pristina. Illegal abolishment of dinner was reported and took into consideration in that context only as a part of complaint against Pristina authorities. 4. Number 1, systematic, widespread and well-planned attacks against Serbs by Pristina. Number 2, intentional creation of unbearable living conditions for Serbs. And number 3, persecution of Serbs. The dramatic complaint on persecution of Serbs, which SC took into consideration at the emergency session, was blandly and prosaically presented in the report in the following way. Mr. Vučić and Mr. Kurti participated in the session presenting contrasting narratives regarding the situation in Kosovo and the regulation's impact. In that regard, I believe that it is important to remind that Serbia was not presenting just some narrative at the respective session, quite the opposite. Our address was the mere numbering of concrete data and facts on the campaign of systematic, well-planned and widespread Pristina's attack against Serb population. On that occasion, I mentioned, among other things, concrete data on the following. The illegal expropriation of more than 1 million square meters of Serbian land for construction of illegal bases of special police in the north of Kosovo. Disabling freedom of movement for Serbs by meaningless stoppings, humiliating treatment, beatings, and even other acts of violence at illegal armed checkpoints and at other places throughout the north of Kosovo and Metohija. Arbitrary apprehensions of dozens of feminine Serbs, as well as unfound in long custody based only on their ethnicity and without raising charges. Meaningless shooting by Pristina special forces and almost constant presence of armored vehicles in peaceful urban environments. Making decisions on confiscating buildings owned by Serbian institutions which have been owning them for more than a century. Introduction on the 9 months illegal embargo on Serbian goods and seizures of legal goods owned by Serbian merchants. Violent confiscation of the property of the Serbian Orthodox Church, whereby Pristina violates special protective zones around the Serbian Orthodox Church facilities, while renaming Serbian sacral facilities, which are several centuries old, to Albanian ones. Ploughing and destruction of Serbian cemeteries. Arming illegal so-called Kosovo security forces, which in accordance with paragraph 9b, paragraph 15 and article 6, annex 1 of the UN SC resolution 1244 should be demilitarized and dismantled. Disabling payment of 60,946 salaries and pensions to Serbs in Kosovo and Metohija, 2,430 scholarships for students and pupils, funds for financing soup kitchens for about 2,000 socially most vulnerable citizens, as well as all other incomes for Serbs. 470 unsanctioned ethnically motivated attacks against Serbs. 75 attacks against sacred facilities of the Serbian Orthodox Church. 25 attacks against Serbian children, including attempt of murder of the 11-year-old Serb child by the representative of the illegal Kosovo security forces on Christmas 2023 and his cousin of 21 years old. And yet, instead of being sanctioned, Kurti's regime in Pristina keeps being rewarded. We cannot count the number of times the events in Banjska have been mentioned by various international officials, news outlets, and even in front of this council. On the other hand, not even an ounce of that zeal and energy has been used to raise the issue of the horrific crime committed by a soldier under the command of here present Vljosa Osmani, a uniformed soldier of the so-called KSF, who while on duty using his service rifle and on the eve of the Orthodox Christmas, cold-bloodedly shot an 11-year-old boy Stefan Stojanovic and his 21-year-old cousin Miloš Stojanovic. Sometimes we wonder whether the fact that he has only been charged for misdemeanor is due to the fact that the victims were just ethnic Serbs. Let me remind you once again of Kurti's words pronounced here at the session of this distinguished body. The regulation does nothing to ban or prevent the government of Serbia from providing financial assistance to Kosovo Serbs. Each different suggestion is nothing but a false propaganda aimed at inciting ethnic tensions. The regulation strives only to provide transparency and legality of the cash that is being imported to Kosovo in accordance with our constitution and the EU monetary policy. The same rules apply to all cash imports from any country in any currency. They do not ban dinar transfers from Serbia. The proof that Kurti was lying to this distinguished body is also that few days ago, the topic of the Brussels of Dialogue meeting was precisely how to resolve this problem. The solid proof is also a fact that the American Special Envoy for the Western Balkans stated on 14th of March in Pristina, more than a month after Kurti had lied to Security Council, that the issue of dinar was an emerging humanitarian issue that we need to address immediately. Mr. Escobar also said that he was moved by the stories of ordinary Serbs who were affected most directly by the ban of dinar. The American envoy said on that occasion that Albin Kurti had refused his plan for resolving that humanitarian issue. Asked by the media why Kurti had decided to proceed with the ban of dinar, knowing that this issue could have been resolved through the establishment of community of Serb majority municipalities, Mr. Escobar answered that it was the question for Kurti. Kurti lied before this council also when he was speaking about the alleged introduction of the 3-month transition measures in reference to the decision on dinar currency, which did not happen, but new bans and repression followed instead. And yet, instead of being sanctioned, Kurti's regime keeps being rewarded. So all the aforementioned facts confirm that Pristina and Kurti have never told the truth, but that Serbs in Kosovo and Metohija are the target of the well-planned, systematic and widespread harassment by Pristina's institutions aimed at their persecution. After the emergency SC session, this fact should have been clearly underlined in the report, alongside with the ambiguous condemnation of Pristina's violence. We do not expect UNMIK to tailor its reports to suit political desires and aspirations of any involved parties. On the contrary, we advocate for the reporting that is grounded solely on facts. Hence, we expect UNMIK to deliver clear and precise reports to the Member States regarding state of affairs on the ground. Additionally, credible reporting does not imply neutrality and/or ambiguity towards events that directly endanger the population in Kosovo. Such neutrality is unacceptably given that UNMIK is duty-bound as mandated by this esteemed body to clearly and loudly oppose any attempt to threaten the civilian population in the province. We also believe that the report misses information for the Security Council on concrete measures that the UN Security General Special Representative has taken in order to discourage, anticipate, disable or sanction Pristina's violence and persecution of Serbs and other non-Albanians. Let me remind you, the international civil presence headed by the Special Representative has obligation to secure normal life in Kosovo. Paragraph 10 of the Resolution 1244 clearly reads that the Secretary General is authorized to establish international civil presence, among other things, in order to oversee the development of provisional democratic self-governing institutions and to ensure conditions for peaceful and normal life for all inhabitants of Kosovo. We had been listening for years that the Special Representative had transferred their authorizations to the provisional institutions of self-government and that there was no legal basis for him or her to take other actions. However, let me remind the Security Council that those competencies were transferred to the provisional institutions by the Special Representative through constitutional framework of provisional self-government in Kosovo. This document was enacted precisely by the UN Security General's Special Representative on 15th of May 2001, and in accordance with mandate outlined in UNSC Resolution 1244 via Regulation number 2001-9, and it remains legally binding. Furthermore, Chapter 12 of the UNMIK Constitutional Framework states as follows: the exercise of the responsibilities of the provisional institutions under this constitutional framework shall not affect or diminish the authority of the SRSG to ensure full implementation of UNSCR 1244, including overseeing the provisional institutions of self-government, its officials and its agencies, and taking appropriate measures whenever their actions are inconsistent with UNSCR 1244 or this constitutional framework. Therefore, it is undisputable that the UNSG Special Representative has the explicit obligation to report on the concrete measures she has taken to stop and disable ethnically motivated persecution of population in accordance with the UN Security Council Resolution 1244, or at least to offer explanation why she failed to take such measures, if that is the case. Instead, like I said, what we have is a enumerating of almost all individual cases in this report, but other lack of clear context of persecution of civilians that is taking place in reality in the ground, which was discussed at the Security Council emergency session. However, while the emergency session of the Security Council was mentioned only once, and attacks against civilians within Prishtina's campaign of their persecution, no even once, tragic development in Banjska village of 24 September were mentioned for a total of 8 times in this report. That is why I need to reiterate what I said at the emergency session of the Security Council, and which refers to the conclusion that those developments were not caused by the consequence of Kurti's repression and persecution of civilians. Serbia unambiguously condemned the violence in Banjska that very evening, and that is why it will not allow that this tragedy is used as an alibi for persecuting Serbs, as well as for diverting the attention from the fact that this persecution takes place in the ground on a daily basis. Let me remind you that for more than a year prior to tragic events, the Republic of Serbia had been publicly warning of all international representatives that Serbs in Kosovo had been facing systematic and widespread attacks and violence of Kurti's chauvinistic regime. Since autumn 2021, Serbs have been completely excommunicated from the political economic system of the so-called Kosovo. Serbian police, envisaged by Article 9 of the Brussels Agreement, was replaced with Kurti's monoethnic paramilitary formations that are harassing, beating up and apprehending. Nobody wanted to listen to our pleas to stop the terror. Pristina has been systematically undermining life and elementary rights of the Serbian people. Let me remind you that Pristina organized then in Serb-majority municipalities shameful elections, which Serbs boycotted for a violation of their rights and for endangering their safety through Kurti's illegal replacement of the regional police commander. Even though only 0.029% Serbs voted in those elections, and Serbs constitute 95% of the population there, new Albanian municipal authorities were confirmed and appointed with complete absence of any legitimacy. Then they came to the head office of those Serbian municipalities as true procurators, followed by heavily armed Kosovo special police units. What followed then is the brutal terror against the Serbs, who are now being terrorized by the special police forces, while illegitimate Albanian municipal officials make and implement decisions that are directly against the interests of the Serbs. And yet, instead of being sanctioned, Kurti's regime keeps being rewarded. In spite of the declarative international calls to end this situation, Pristina persistently continues with the occupation of the north and disables the election of legitimate local authorities. After false promises that it would revoke illegitimate Albanian officials, it requested a petition from Serbs for the replacement of the respective authorities in order to organize the referendum for revoking them. In order to make such a referendum a successful one, it takes turnout of more than 50% registered voters, and Serbs had initially agreed to organize signing of the mentioned petition and gathered more than 20% required voters' signatures. So 6 times more than number of votes by which some Albanian officials were elected. In order to prevent revoking and maintain favorable conditions for continued persecution of Serbs, by manipulating with the voter lists, Pristina suddenly increased the number of registered voters. It was done in the period when more than 15% majority Serb population escaping from the repression left the province. That is why there are 46,249 voters in voter list of those 4 municipalities today, which is 5.7% more than in 2021. Between October 2021 and March 2024, 2,498 new voters were added, and number of Albanian voters was artificially increased by 12.42%. If one adds to that the disabling of voting by mail for the expelled persons, but also the campaign of intimidation and blackmails against the Serbs not to take part in such a referendum, it is obvious that Pristina intends to finalize the persecution of Serbs with the support of illegitimate municipal authorities. That is why the recent decision made by the Serbs to boycott such a referendum is quite understandable and the only possible one, because they are disabled to reach the set threshold of 50% registered voters by being persecuted, banned to vote outside Kosovo, and by registering Albanian voters not living there. In parallel, Pristina threatens Serbs with tax sanctions, financial sanctions of 2,000 euros if they refuse the call for census. It carries out arbitrary apprehensions and all other kinds of physical and institutional violence. Speaking of arbitrary apprehensions of Serbs, which, by the way, were marked as unacceptable by the European Union, but also speaking of false guarantees of international community that there would be no apprehensions of Serbs for taking part in protests, allow me to mention on the most recent case. On April 14th, Pristina Special Forces arrested Srećko Sofronijević, Serb from Zvečan, whom they wounded in the back from automatic weapons in 2021. He was wounded at the political protests of Serbs against the illegal intrusion of those units in the north of Kosovo, where in accordance with Article 9 of the First Agreement from 2013, they should not come without approval by Serbs. Sofronijević hardly survived the shooting, for which none of the members of Pristina Special Forces was called for accountability, and let alone sanctioned. Instead, Sofronijević was arrested a few days ago and placed to custody on charges for a violation of the so-called constitutional order of the fake state and the so-called Kosovo. He is a man who has never made any offense or anything else, and who spent all this time of Pristina's terror in his hometown and his house. When he was arrested, of course, he was accompanied by his wife. Despite all that, Pristina apprehended him on charges for the aforementioned offense. We have since received reports about further physical abuse of Sofronijević upon his reception to the Albanian majority-run prison in Podevo. At the same time, one of Kurti's co-perpetrators of persecution of Serbs and a minister in his government, Liburna Liu, declared the following in December 2023. The independent state of Kosovo is a temporary project. This is a citation. A Kosovo nation cannot be created. So the innocent and shot Sofronijević is imprisoned for the alleged violation of some constitutional order, and Aliyu is still free, occupying one of the highest-ranking positions in Pristina. That much about the apprehensions and persecution of Serbs as a part of some alleged non-selective implementation of the law. Those who are friends and supporters of Pristina are the only ones believing in this kind of the rule of law. Serbia demands the immediate release of all political prisoners held by Pristina's regime. There cannot be a reconciliation without liberation of all political prisoners. Let me remind you that Serbia has adopted several times the amnesty law, according to which thousands of KLA terrorists, including Albin Kurti, were set free. Speaking of the rule of law, the biggest opponent of the so-called Kosovo's constitution is not us in Belgrade, but precisely Kurti regime. It might seem unusual to you, but this is not exaggeration, but easily verifiable fact. The Brussels Agreement was ratified with a two-third majority in the so-called Kosovo's parliament, and it derogates all other legal norms, and yet again, Kurti and his associates publicly refuse to implement the foundation provisions of this agreement. The Constitution guarantees the equality of Serbian language and Cyrillic alphabet, which is omitted. The Constitution envisages that one ministry should be led by the party that wins the majority among the Serbs, which has been completely neglected. And yet, instead of being sanctioned, Kurti's regime keeps being rewarded. In other words, while everybody has been talking and reporting for months on the situation in Kosovo through a wrong interpretation of the events in Banjska, what we have in the ground is the continuation of open and unsanctioned persecution of Serbs in formally peaceful terms while not having a single action to stop that crime against humanity, just like it is confirmed by this report. Dear President, distinguished members, UN Security Council is one among only few international fora before one can discuss in arguments and openly about the situation in Kosovo. To tell you the truth, there are less and less opportunities to do so, because the representatives of Pristina, with wholehearted political advisory and logistic help from their international sponsors, by making small steps, impose as the perfect act something that is not normal and that is inadmissible from the position of the international law, and something that must be accepted calmly. The United Nations, as the last instance and the bastion of defense of international law, cannot allow ambiguous flexibility in evaluating dramatic crimes against some population, because thereby the system founded on the UN Charter undermines itself and its own authority. Today we need strong and principled United Nations more than ever, and the situation in Kosovo and Metohija is a good opportunity for the World Organization to strengthen its authority. In addition to insisting on clear condemnation and termination of persecution of Serbs, the Republic of Serbia underlines once again that it is fully committed to the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue as the only peaceful way for overcoming disagreements and resolving problems. Persistent refusal by Pristina to consistently implement almost any out of totally 52 reached political agreements is the additional evidence that Pristina persecutes Serbs with clear premeditation. In other words, those agreements were designed and reached precisely that the relations between Belgrade and Pristina could normalize in time, and that all people during this political process could live their normal life in reality. It involves also Serbs in Kosovo, to which the agreements from 2011 guarantee dozen specific solutions for protection of their anyway difficult position in dominantly Albanian environment. As a credible and responsible partner, to that aim Belgrade had delivered its commitments from the dialogue a long time ago. By doing so, it had been continuously making very painful concessions, among other things, that Serbs in Kosovo could enjoy peace, safety and respect for fundamental rights. Contrary to that, Serbs have been exposed to open persecution for years, and while preparing that persecution for 11 years, Pristina refused and still refuses to implement its most important commitment from the dialogue. That commitment refers to the need of consistent establishment of the community with Serb-majority municipalities, as agreed by agreements from 2013 and 2015, as the mechanism for protection of individual and collective rights of Serbs in the province, as the foundation of the entire normalization process and all other agreed agreements. Let me make it clear, Belgrade's insisting on the ASM or CSM is without any prejudice to the status of Kosovo and Metohija. This is about institutional solution that would anticipate it and disable persecution of Serbs that has been carried out in the past years. It is meant for enabling safe life in the ground, economic development and protection of elementary political rights of Serbs. If the ASM were established in the past 11 years, I'm certain that it would create favorable conditions for the true dialogue and historical reconciliation between the communities. However, this is precisely what those who are in power in Pristina do not want. The reason is that they are guided by ethnic hatred towards the Serbs, which they use for inciting international tensions and as an excuse for finalizing the persecution and ethnic cleansing of Serbs. That is the only reason why they are against the formation of the ASM in accordance with the agreements from 2013 and 2015, hoping that by successive cancellation of rights and creation of unbearable living conditions for survival of Serbian people, this would leave Kosovo and Metohija, whereby the idea of the ASM would be pointless. Unfortunately, the obvious is not obvious in this report too. I reiterate very well-known factual data and neutrally given data on place, time and topics of the dialogue meetings that are very well known to all of us will not end persecution of Serbs, lead to the stabilization of circumstances and force Pristina not to undermine the dialogue and finally implement its obligations. In that sense, it's really high time that we perceive that the population in Kosovo cannot rely either on the United Nations as the objective arbiter and someone that will prevent Pristina's cunning ethnic engineering. I'm afraid that it brings us to the possibility of unpredictable scenarios with immense consequences. In order to eliminate even the slightest possibility that such a development does not take place, we believe that it is necessary that the Special Representative exercise her authorizations and supervises the provisional institutions of self-government, but also to take urgent actions in cooperation with KFOR aimed at ensuring safety and human rights to all inhabitants of Kosovo. Simply said, it is obvious that we urgently need a solution that means more UNMIK, not less. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, pogrom against the Serbs in Kosovo and Metohija has been lasting since 1999 until today. Let me remind you to some of unpunished crimes committed in the presence and before the eyes of the UN international forces with predominant participation of the same countries that committed the aggression against the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. In July 1999, Albanian terrorists massacred 14 Serbian farmers from Starogradsko village near Lipljan. In February 2001, a bus taking Serbs displaced from Kosovo and Metohija to visit the graves of their loved ones was blown up. 12 Serbs were killed and 43 of them were wounded in that attack. In 2003, Albanian terrorists in Goraždevac were shooting at Serbian children who were swimming in Bistrica River, and 2 children were killed then, while several were severely wounded. The culmination of evil was the pogrom against the Serbian people in March 2004 when 16 Serbs were killed, hundreds were injured, about 4,000 expelled, 6 towns and 9 villages experienced ethnic cleansing, more than 800 facilities including 35 Orthodox churches and monasteries were destroyed or severely damaged. And the balance of 25 years of the alleged peace is almost 250,000 Serbs and other non-Albanians that are still expelled and internally displaced. They don't seem to have right to a sustainable return because the creators of the apparent peace estimated that it is easier to integrate those people into environments where they are against their will than to create functional multi-ethnic society in Kosovo. If we translate this into daily language, it is obvious that everything has been tolerated for Albanian extremism in the past 25 years and in such a way that the ideologists and executors of the politics of evil and persecution of Serbs are not isolated and punished but rewarded. Not only that no one who ordered these crimes was brought to justice, but on the 20th anniversary of the March pogrom, that chauvinistic regime offered again the same lie on the drowning of 3 boys in Chabra village, which initiated the inevitable wave of violence, murders, robberies, and expelling. It is clear to everyone that the aim of this was to justify the violence, but at the same time the invitation for repetition of crimes that had taken place on that fatal 17th March. And yet, instead of being sanctioned, Kurti's regime keeps being rewarded. Commitment to peace is not a predominant state of the mind in Kosovo. Political elite in Pristina does not think of peace as of the value, and their obsession is consolidation at any cost of what they see as an independent state. And they are carrying out that project now by persecuting Serbs and other non-Albanians, not caring for the lives of the people. Distinguished members of this council should know that Albin Kurti is not here today because he is busy undermining regional stability, since he is personally at the forefront of his party's campaign for elections in neighboring North Macedonia. And imagine, the most popular politician in Macedonia is not Albin Kurti, it's Aleksandar Vučić, president of Serbia, but not having any kind of campaign in North Macedonia. As the president of Serbia, I'm sorry that our citizen acts in this way in the international arena. I want to convey to the people of North Macedonia that interfering in their internal matters is not a politics of Serbia, but of our irresponsible citizen Albin Kurti. We will certainly have the opportunity today to listen to fairy tales from those from Pristina who ordered pogrom against the Serbs about the so-called Kosovo as the champion of democracy. We are deeply disappointed that UNMIK report that is before us today does not provide sufficient foundations to claim the opposite. But as the President of Serbia, UN member state, facing secessionist movement in its southern province, I am obliged not to make compromise with the truth and not use euphemism for the actual state in the ground. Even though today's session is dedicated to the concrete 6-month report on UNMIK's work, I must warn you not only to the danger resulting from revitalizing the hatred politics carried out by Pristina, but also to the danger brought before the international legal order by the operation of bringing Pristina, that is, self-declared Kosovo, to membership of the Council of Europe. The final of this mockery against the international law is planned for mid-May, and that is why we can easily find ourselves in a situation where chauvinistic regime which is carrying out persecution of the entire nation is rewarded for their actions, and precisely by the organization whose sense and proclaimed objective is to promote and protect the rule of law and to protect human rights and freedoms. For creating already in details described apartheid system in the heart of Europe, Kurti's regime was rewarded with visa liberalization, probable membership to the Council of Europe, and what's even worse, by arming the illegal armed forces for which this Council established that they should not exist. In the meantime, what is the world doing? The world is silent because the politics of democracy, the development and preservation of multicultural and multi-ethnic society, for which the Western countries taxpayers gave billions, is replaced by the politics of consolidation of the so-called Kosovo statehood. With the Council of Europe membership, Kurti would be directly rewarded with political support for the next so-called Kosovo elections, having in mind that the opposition following the Quint advice publicly called on Pristina not to apply for membership to the Council of Europe. It turns out that Kurti will get another victory served on a plate. Implementation of the decision on property of Dečani monastery is actually the best indicator what kind of a banana republic we speak about. The only reason why the judgment on Dečani has been finally implemented after 11 years is faking the tolerance towards the church, while for the past 2 years the land of the size of 2 states of Vatican was taken away from Serbs in the north, though expropriation which is illegal even in accordance with the so-called Kosovo laws. That is why I warn this body, member states, as well as all other bodies of the United Nations, to have in mind that there are plans that the same model of blind denial of reality is implemented also within the UN, and all with the aim to make perpetrators of persecution against the Serbs happy, as well as to meet political interests of the powerful ones. If that would ever occur, it would beyond any doubt be the final and the fatal blow to international law that would inflict the irreparable damage to the UN system and international order based on equality and sovereignty of member states of the World Organization. Fortunately, I'm almost certain that such demolishing plans will not be achieved because there is a convincing majority of those who blindly observe international law, UN Charter and all SC resolutions, including Resolution 1244, which guarantees territorial integrity of the Republic of Serbia with the territory of Kosovo and Metohija as its part. I want to urge on the conscience on the countries that supported the independence of the so-called Kosovo, a project that you had presented to the world and your domestic public as the future model of liberal democracy, multi-ethnicity and multiculturalism, is galloping today towards mono-ethnic despotism cleaned of all minorities. By giving priority to the consolidation of the so-called Kosovo statehood in terms in which basic collective political, economic, but also individual rights of Serbs and other non-Albanians are being violated, you sentenced anyway a legal project of the so-called Kosovo's independence to moral death. And just to add one more sentence, we were accused for many months in numbers of international medias that we were just about to launch an aggression like it is possible to be done by someone who acts on its own territory against Kosovo or some other nations in the region. And no one was saying sorry or excuse us for these terrible lies and falsities. And I wanted to reassure you that Serbia is very much committed and fully devoted to peace, international public order, UN resolution, and to the dialogue process under the auspices of European Union, and we'll do our best to keep calm and tranquility in the region. And you can always count on Serbia's seriousness and responsible approach to this issue. Thank you for listening to me.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Vučić for his...
replying to everything that was said. It's about something that happened for the first time in his body. You brought people that do not belong here to diplomatic corps or to advisory team of Madame Osmani. It is a sort of political theater and a setup for Serbian delegation. And what we were listening to, I was fully focused on a report made by Karolina Zijade. And what we've been listening so far, it was like a war trial process against Serbs for something that happened 25 years ago. Not a single word about the report. Nothing about last 6 months. Why didn't you inform us who was going to be a member of each delegation? Do you really believe that there were no raped Serbian women in Kosovo during that period? I can show you, but there is one person that I couldn't bring here as a part of my delegation. That's Marica Mirić from Bijelo Polje, from Kosovo. That woman, at that period of time, was raped several times and then slaughtered. But that was not the topic of our today's meeting. That's the real issue. Please next time inform us, at least as a founder of the United Nations, that some citizens that will be present at this session will bring more people to put the blame on the other side, because we are here to discuss the report and the possible consequences of political activities and everything else. And just to ask you one question, because you heard that a few days ago Serbia presented Irani drones somewhere in Serbia. Just for all of you to hear the truth, to hear what is really going on. I have never seen, and no one in Serbia has ever seen any single Irani drone. It has never happened in our country.
This can be addressed in your right of reply. Thank you, President Vučić. And with regards to the delegation from Kosovo...